I want to welcome you all. Thank you for joining us for today's Paid Family Leave webinar for employees. I'm Adam Rossi from the board's Branding and Stakeholder Engagement Unit. And today we will be providing you with an overview of New York State's paid family leave benefit, including updates for 2024, some important information regarding COVID-19, as well as some resources to help you if you plan on taking paid family leave. We will be using the chat feature to receive your questions today. You may enter your questions at any point during today's presentation in the chat box, which is located on the right-hand side of your screen. If you look on the bottom, you should see a little chat bubble. Just click on that. The box will pop right up. Courtney Valley is joining me today. She is with our Office of General Counsel. She is here to answer your questions. Also, before we get started, I just want to note your name and email were given to us when you registered today. However, if you have a specific question you'd like to discuss more deeply with the board, please feel free to share that topic along with your name and email so that we can have the appropriate board staff follow up with you. We have set the chat settings so that only Courtney and I can see your questions come in, so you don't have to worry about other people seeing your personal information. With that, however, I do want to get started on today's presentation. So since its implementation in 2018, paid family leave benefits have been significantly enhanced to further improve the lives of working New Yorkers and their families, including some more time off, more uses of paid family leave, and more financial security. In today's session, we will be providing you with an overview of New York's paid family leave and how it works, including the uses, wage and time off benefits, employee contributions, eligibility, and how you request paid family leave. We will also review 2024 benefit and contribution information related to FMLA and COVID-19 quarantine leave, and then highlight the many resources available to you. So to get started, we are going to do a little background. Why do we need paid family leave? For too long, employees have struggled to maintain their jobs when they need to care for a loved one during a specific time of need. Whether that's welcoming a new baby, caring for a family member with a serious health condition, or dealing with family pressures when a loved one is deployed abroad on active military service. Since the pandemic, many employees have also been challenged by having to quarantine due to COVID-19, or to care for a minor dependent child who is subject to a mandatory quarantine or order of isolation. Employees in these situations face the stress of losing income when they need to take time off to help their family and fear that their job may be gone when the family situation is over. So, in response to these needs, New York took action. In April of 2016, New York's paid family leave, which is the nation's strongest and most comprehensive paid family leave policy, was signed into law. Paid family leave is employee-funded insurance that helps employees be there for their family when they're most needed. Because of paid family leave, workers across New York no longer have to choose between caring for their loved ones and their jobs, as we now have employee-paid insurance to help in these critical times. Paid family leave provides job-protected paid time off so you can bond with a newly born, adopted, or foster child, care for a family member with a serious health condition, or assist loved ones when a family member is deployed upon active military service. Under legislation signed into law in March of 2020, paid family leave also provides paid time off and job protection so employees can care for themselves or for their minor dependent child when under a mandatory order of quarantine or isolation due to COVID-19. We will go into more detail on this later in the presentation. The use for this is a little bit different than the others. In addition to paid time off, New York's paid family leave also has strong employee protections. You are guaranteed to return to the same or a comparable job after taking paid family leave. A comparable job is defined as a position with comparable employment benefits, pay, and other terms and conditions of employment. You are guaranteed continuation of health insurance while out on paid family leave on the same terms as if you had continued to work. If you contribute to the cost of your health insurance, you must continue paying your portion of the premium while on leave. You are also guaranteed protection from discrimination and retaliation. Requesting or taking paid family leave cannot be held against you. So now let's take a look at the three basic uses of paid family leave. We will start with bonding with a child. Paid family leave provides both parents time to bond with a new child within the first 12 months of the birth, adoption, or foster placement of the new child. Parents who work for different employers can take paid family leave at the same time to bond with the same child. Parents who work for the same employer can take it at the same time unless their employer prohibits it. In that case, they can take the leave separately over the first 12 months following the child's birth, adoption, or foster placement. It is important to note that expectant parents cannot take paid family leave for their own pregnancy. You can take it after the baby is born because paid family leave is used to care for someone else, not for your own health condition. A parent may be able to take paid family leave before the actual adoption or placement of a child if an absence from work is required for the adoption or foster placement to be finalized. Paid family leave is also available for employees to care for a spouse, domestic partner, child or stepchild, sibling, parent or step-parent, parent-in-law, grandparent, or a grandchild who has a serious health condition. A few other important notes for family care. In terms of domestic partner is defined broadly under the paid family leave law. It includes people who are not related by blood in a manner that would bar marriage in New York State and are dependent on one another for support. So, for example, an employee may be able to prove that they're in a domestic partnership by showing that they own property together or if they have children in commons. A legal relationship is not necessary. Also, it does not matter if these family members live outside of New York State or even outside of the country. Employees can take paid family leave to care for their family member as long as they are within close and continuing proximity, or in other words, present at the same location as the family member they're caring for during most of the paid family leave period. This may include necessary physical care, emotional support, visitation, assistance in treatment, transportation, arranging for a change in care, assistance with essential daily living matters, and personal attendance services. In order to take this type of leave, your family member must have a serious health condition. What is a serious health condition? Well, a serious health condition is defined as an illness, injury, or condition that requires either inpatient care in a hospital, hospice, or residential facility, or continuing treatment or supervision by a healthcare provider. So on your screen, you're going to see some examples here of some conditions that may qualify as a serious health condition. Maybe you need 1 or more full days to care for your mom when she undergoes chemotherapy, or your spouse or domestic partner had surgery and they need help recuperating at home, or if your child is undergoing treatment for addiction and they cannot attend school for a period of time. These are situations that may qualify for paid family leave and may be certified by the healthcare provider if they believe the condition constitutes as a serious health condition. Ultimately, the insurance carrier makes the final determination as to whether such conditions qualify for paid family leave. Also of note, since February of 2019, paid family leave also explicitly includes support for organ donors. Former Governor Cuomo signed legislation to expand the paid family leave law's definition of serious health condition to explicitly include preparation for and recovery from surgery related to organ or tissue donation, ensuring those who donate can be cared for by their eligible family members under New York's paid family leave law. Non-serious medical conditions such as common cold or flu, routine dental work, cosmetic treatments, these are generally not included. However, If medical complications arise and the family member then meets guidelines for a serious health condition, it may be eligible. The third type of leave is for assisting during a military deployment. Paid family leave benefits are available when a family member is deployed abroad on active military service or who has been notified of an impending call or order of active service abroad and assistance is needed. Reasons for paid family leave for an active service deployment are the same as the military provisions of the Federal Family Medical Leave Act, also known as FMLA, which we will cover in a bit later in this presentation. But the laws here cover the employee's spouse, domestic partner, child, or parent. There are several instances where paid family leave will help here, and they are shown on your screen. So now let's look at the program benefits and contributions for 2024. Employees are eligible to take up to 12 weeks of paid family leave at 67% of their average weekly wage, capped at 67% of the New York State average weekly wage. An employee's average weekly wage is based on their last 8 weeks of pay prior to taking paid family leave. For 2024, the New York State average weekly wage is $1,718.15. So that means the maximum weekly benefit for 2024 is $1,151.16. This is $20.08 more than the maximum weekly benefit from 2023. It is important to note that employees can take this paid time off all at once or intermittently, but you'll have to be in full day increments. To estimate your wage benefit, you can use the new 2024 calculator, which is on the Paid Family Leave website. Paid family leave, as we mentioned, is fully funded through employee contributions. Contribution rate is reviewed annually and is subject to change by the New York State Department of Financial Services. For 2024, the payroll contribution is 0.373% of an employee's gross wages each pay period. The maximum annual contribution is $333.25, and this is $66.18 less than in 2023. Employees earning less than the current New York State average weekly wage of $1,718.15 will contribute less than the annual cap of $333.25, consistent with their actual wages. And to estimate your deductions, we also have a 2024 payroll deduction calculator, which you can also find on the Paid Family Leave website. So quickly, to summarize the benefits and contributions for 2024, maximum weekly benefit has increased from $1,131.08 to $1,151.16. Also, as of January 1st of this year, employers can now deduct at the rate of 0.373% of an employee's gross wages each pay period, but capped at an annual maximum of $333.25. So now that we've covered the types of leave, the benefits and the costs, let's now discuss who's covered and eligible for paid family leave. Most employees who work for private employers in New York State are covered under paid family leave. If you work for a public employer, your employer may opt into the program. If you're a public employer represented by a union, you may be covered if paid family leave is collectively bargained. For covered employees, eligibility for taking paid family leave depends on meeting specific requirements for the amount of time employees have worked for their employer. Full-time employees, including domestic workers, who regularly work 20 or more hours per week, are eligible for paid family leave after 26 consecutive weeks of employment with the same employer. Part-time employees who work a regular schedule of less than 20 hours per week are eligible after working 175 days. They do not need to be consecutive. Also, citizenship and/or immigration status is not a factor in employee eligibility. Paid family leave coverage is not optional for eligible employees. You can waive coverage if you regularly work 20 or more hours per week, but won't be in employment for 26 consecutive weeks, or if you regularly work fewer than 20 hours per week and won't work 175 days in a 52-week period. Seasonal workers are a pretty good example of this, since they may work full-time, but they will only be working for 3 months out of the year, so they would be eligible to waive coverage. If you meet the criteria for waiving coverage, your employer must provide you with a waiver form, which is available on the Paid Family Leave website. If you waive coverage, you will not make contributions and you will not be eligible for paid family leave benefits. Employers should keep a copy of your waiver on file. If your schedule changes such that you no longer qualify for a waiver, your waiver will automatically be revoked within 8 weeks of the schedule change. You can also voluntarily revoke a waiver at any time. If your waiver is revoked, your employer will begin taking paid family leave contributions and collect any retroactive amounts due. Now we're going to cover how to request paid family leave when you need it, as well as how disputes and discrimination issues will be handled. If you're an eligible employee, the maximum benefit is available to you once every 52 weeks, and it is a rolling calendar, not a calendar year. 52 weeks, once every 52 weeks on a rolling calendar scale. So when you're ready to request leave, there are 3 basic steps. Step 1 is to notify your employer at least 30 days before the start of your leave if it's foreseeable, or as soon as possible. Step 2 is to complete the request forms. And then there is step 3, which is to send all the required forms to the insurance carrier. The insurance carrier must pay or deny your request within 18 calendar days of receiving the completed request, or on your first day of leave, whichever is later. You must submit your completed request package to your employer's insurance carrier within 30 days after the start of your leave to avoid losing benefits. And you can get these request forms from your employer, from your employer's insurance carrier, or you can just go directly to paidfamilyleave.ny.gov/forms. If for some reason your request is denied, or if you have another claim-related dispute, such as the amount of benefits or the timeliness of a carrier's decision, you may request to have the denial reviewed by a neutral arbitrator. Your insurance carrier or your employer, if they're self-insured, will notify you of the reason for that denial, and then will provide you with information about requesting arbitration. And arbitration for paid family leave is handled by NAM, which is National Arbitration and Mediation. You can find more information on their website. You see that link right there on your screen. So as we mentioned earlier, your employer may not discriminate against you for requesting or taking paid family leave, and you are guaranteed job protection with the same or a comparable job upon return from paid family leave. If your employer does not return you to your same or a comparable job, if they terminate you, if they reduce your pay and your benefits, or if they discipline you in any way as a result of you requesting or taking paid family leave, you can file a discrimination claim with the Workers' Compensation Board. An administrative law judge may order an employer to reinstate the employee, pay any lost wages, pay attorney fees, and pay up to $500 in penalties. The process and the forms are available at paidfamilyleave.ny.gov, or you can call the Paid Family Leave Helpline for assistance. That number is 844-337-6303, and we will have that number up for you in another slide later in the presentation. So don't feel like you have to jot that down right now. Now, we are frequently asked about the similarities and differences between paid family leave and FMLA, so I want to take a quick look to review those. And there are several similarities between New York's paid family leave and the FMLA, Family and Medical Leave Act. Both provide leave for bonding with a child, caring for a family member with a serious health condition, and assisting when a family member is deployed on active military service abroad. You are also guaranteed that you will return to the same or a comparable position, and that your health insurance will continue on the same terms as if you would continue to work. And again, if you contribute to the cost of your health insurance, you must continue to pay your portion of that premium cost while on leave for both. However, there are several key differences. First being that paid family leave is paid, whereas FMLA is not paid. Almost all private employers will carry PFL insurance. FMLA does not include insurance, and it has a 50 employee threshold for eligibility. The length of time you must work is also different. For paid family leave, if you regularly work 20 or more hours per week, you must be in employment for 26 consecutive weeks for that employer. And if you regularly work fewer than 20 hours per week, you must work 175 days for that same employer. For FMLA, you must have worked for a full year and 1,250 hours in the last 52 weeks to qualify. The biggest distinction here may be that under New York's paid family leave, you are taking leave to care for someone else, not for your own health condition. FMLA, however, does allow you to take leave for your own health condition. Also, PFL is only taken in full day increments, whereas FMLA may be taken hourly. And lastly, under PFL, you do not need to use other paid time off first. Now, I also mentioned earlier about the additional uses of paid family leave that took effect under emergency legislation enacted in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Though the pandemic state of emergency has ended, the legislation cited no end date, so these laws are still in effect. So we just want to make sure that you are aware of them. Depending on the size and type of employer, the legislation provides benefits for either paid sick leave or a combination of New York's paid family leave and disability benefits if you are under an order of mandatory or precautionary quarantine or isolation due to COVID-19. This is the only time you may receive paid family leave and disability benefits at the same time. This also gives you access to paid family leave if your minor dependent child is under an order of mandatory or precautionary quarantine or isolation due to COVID-19. That is offered up to a maximum weekly benefit of $840.70. More detailed information about taking paid family leave for your quarantine or your child's can be found at paidfamilyleave.ny.gov/COVID-19. While you're there, you'll also find information about New York State's COVID-19 paid sick leave requirements, some FAQs, application forms, and more. So as you think about how paid family leave may be able to help you and your family, we do have a number of resources to assist you. Complete details on paid family leave are available at paidfamilyleave.ny.gov, along with other resources including paid family leave request forms and fact sheets, the weekly deduction and benefit calculators, which I showed earlier, as well as information about COVID-19 quarantine leave benefits. You can also contact the Paid Family Leave Helpline at 844-337-6303 for assistance. If you are not already subscribed for email updates on paid family leave, you can subscribe by clicking the Get Updates button on the on the bottom of the paidfamilyleave.ny.gov homepage. So we hope that you found this presentation helpful. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss New York landmark paid family leave benefit with you. We are now going to take some time to answer any questions you may have. As I mentioned, if you have a question, feel free to type it in the chat box. If the bottom right-hand side of your screen, there's a little chat bubble. You can just click on that. Box will pop right up. Just put your question right in there. Please keep in mind, however, that the board is unable to provide legal advice, which includes guidance about what you should do in specific situations. If you have specific questions or concerns about a request for paid family leave, you should contact your disability and paid family leave insurance carrier, as they are the entity that makes the decision to pay or deny benefits. I am going to go back to this slide right here. So you have the phone number and the website information on right there if you want to jot that down. I did see a question come in asking if there's going to be a copy of this presentation. We do have a previously recorded version of this webinar, as well as a copy of the slide deck on the Paid Family Leave website. It is from 2023, but it also has the 2024 information on it. So if you want to just use that for reference, you can go to our YouTube page or the Paid Family Leave website. I believe in the webinar section, you can find all the resources from that presentation. But we will be updating that. We have this series coming up. We have another employee webinar coming up, and we're going to be updating the resources for that. Make sure you're signed up for email notifications so you're aware when that is updated and available. Again, just go right to the Paid Family Leave section on the web or on the bottom of the homepage, select the Get Updates button, and then you can sign up for email notifications there. However, we do have some questions that have already come in. We have a couple questions already coming in now. So I am going to let Courtney take over the floor here to answer the questions. And Courtney, the floor is now yours.
All right, thanks, Adam. The first question we got here is, if I live in New York State and I work from home remotely for a company that is not based in New York State, but I do pay New York State paid family leave tax, am I eligible? So a couple things here. First, like Adam said, I cannot provide legal advice, so I'm not going to be able to tell you, yes, you're eligible, no, you're not eligible. But to be eligible for New York State paid family leave, you have to be what's called localized in New York. So what that means is you work in New York. So if you live outside of the state, but you work in an office in New York State, or your office is headquartered somewhere outside of New York State, but you work inside of New York State, you're probably going to be eligible if you work for a covered employer. So if you work remotely from New York State most of the time, you are likely considered localized in New York State. And once you gain eligibility for PFL, you may be eligible, assuming this is a covered employer and assuming you're a covered employee. Whether or not you pay the New York State paid family leave contributions is not a factor in eligibility, but likely, again, if they are taking contributions from you, you're likely eligible. If you think that you're eligible, you are free to apply to your employer's disability and PFL insurance carrier. They're the ones who are actually going to process and pay or deny your request. And if you receive a decision that you disagree with, you'd be able to request arbitration and have the matter resolved by a neutral arbitrator. But generally, if you work in New York State and you're otherwise eligible, you are eligible for New York State PFL. Okay, next question here is, if an employee is out on disability prior to taking PFL, such as for maternity leave, does the disability time count toward PFL eligibility time? And the answer is no. Statutory disability does not count toward eligibility for PFL. Okay, next question here is, are there any businesses exempt from FMLA, such as very small businesses with less than 10 employees, where holding a position is a hardship for the employer? And the answer is no. There is no hardship exemption like there is under the FMLA. It's a covered employer for PFL is an employer with one or more employees in employment on each of at least 30 days in a calendar year. So it's a private employer, and the requirement is just one or more employees in employment in New York State. Okay, next question here is, New York PFL is a rolling 52 weeks. The case can run based on rolling as well if it's intermittent leave, for example, from 9/1/23 to 8/30/24. They don't need to get new medical on 1/1/24. So generally, this is correct. In no event can a single period of PFL cover more than a year, though. So if you get medical certification for a serious health condition and the healthcare provider says, indefinitely, forever, whatever, it's more than a year that the care is going to be needed, and I certify this serious health condition, it's a permanent thing, something like that, request for PFL still can't be more than a year. So you can't have dates that span more than a year. The other thing to keep in mind is that when dates of leave are separated by more than 3 months, so this is intermittent leave, if the serious health condition was certified for, we'll just say the less than a year, we'll say like 8 months or something like that, and you're taking dates within those 8 months, that's fine. You wouldn't need a new application or new medical certification. However, if months go by between dates of leave, like you took 3 days and then there was a period of 5 months where you took 0 days and then you're going to take another day, those are considered separate events under the law because it's separated by more than 3 months, and then it is likely that you'd need updated a new application and updated medical because it's not considered the same period of leave. So you would likely have to get a new application and a new serious health condition certification. But that's something that you could discuss with the carrier as well. Okay, next question here is about COVID quarantine leave. So since quarantine orders are no longer provided by the health department, what documentation is acceptable from employees? So the board does not have jurisdiction over what documentation suffices to show an order of quarantine or isolation. The statute just says a mandatory or precautionary order of quarantine or isolation issued by the state of New York, the Department of Health, the local board of health, or any government entity duly authorized to issue such order due to COVID-19. So I don't have any other information about what constitutes an order of quarantine or isolation. You may want to try contacting the New York State Department of Health or the New York State Department of Labor, as they may have more information, but the board doesn't have jurisdiction over what constitutes an order of quarantine or isolation. Okay, next question here is an employer of 100 plus employees still obligated to pay up to 14 days of COVID paid sick leave? The answer is yes. The legislation for COVID quarantine leave, like Adam said, did not contain an end date. It is still in effect. You're free to contact your legislators if you think that the act should be sunset, but the actual legislation does not contain an end date and it is still in effect. Okay, next question here is what about paternity leave for the birth of a child? I'm assuming you're asking just about if paid family leave is available for the father of a child to take paid family leave. And the answer is yes. Bonding covers each parent, so it's for the parent of a child to bond with their child during the first 12 months following the child's birth or placement for adoption or foster care. So both parents would be included in the definition of bonding leave for PFL. Okay, next question here is what if some paperwork is missing? So I'm assuming you're asking here about your request for PFL. You have 30 days from the first day of leave to apply for PFL before you risk losing benefits. The carrier does not have to pay those benefits if your request is incomplete. They're going to probably deny it without prejudice and tell you what is missing, and then you have a few days to get that together and send it to them. But if your paperwork is incomplete, it's not a complete request for PFL and you are likely going to receive a denial. Okay, next question here is through disability and PFL, the only way an employee can be paid for an absence due to COVID-19. So the COVID-19 quarantine leave law is not just for an absence due to COVID-19. It's only when you're under an order of mandatory or precautionary order of quarantine or isolation due to COVID-19. So it's not just because you have COVID-19, you actually have to be under an order of quarantine or isolation. And depending on the size and type of the employer, you may not have disability and PFL available to you at all. Many employers are required to provide paid sick leave, so COVID-19 specific paid sick leave, and you have to use that. And then if you're still under an order of mandatory or precautionary quarantine or isolation, which is unlikely because most of them are 5 days, to my knowledge, then you wouldn't be eligible for the disability and PFL after that. Some larger employers and public employers, the only benefit available under this quarantine leave law is 14 days of paid sick leave. So it really depends on the size and type of the employer, but if you go to the website paidfamilyleave.ny.gov, right on the page there's a COVID-19 button and you can click there for more information. Okay, I see another question here about how does the leave pay applies during COVID. I'm not going to go into kind of the whole calculation and things like that. If it's COVID paid sick leave, you're getting your full pay. Your employer is required to just pay you paid sick leave. That is COVID-19 specific. If it's disability and PFL, you can look on the website and again, just press that See COVID-19 page and you can find information there. Okay, another question here about COVID. How does the size of the company come into play with dependent COVID? So assuming we're talking about a minor dependent child under an order of quarantine or isolation, if the employee is otherwise eligible for PFL and their minor dependent child is under an order of quarantine or isolation, they may be eligible for paid family leave for that reason. Again, I'm going to refer you to the website and then click the See COVID-19 page for more information on that. Okay, I see another follow-up question about what documentation needs to be provided to require employers to pay the COVID-19 quarantine leave. And again, it's an order of quarantine or isolation, like the definition that I said. The statute says I do not have any other information about what counts as one of those orders of quarantine or isolation. You can go to the website, click the COVID-19 page. You can also try contacting the New York State Department of Labor. They may have a little bit more information as well. Okay, I see a question about 1099s and payroll tax. That does not seem like it's related to PFL, and we do not have jurisdiction over tax matters. So just kind of letting you know that if you have a tax question, you're going to have to contact the New York State Department of Taxation and Finance. Okay, next question here is I am scheduled for my PFL to start tomorrow and I'm still not approved. Every time I call, I am told something is missing. So carriers have 18 days from the first day of leave or receipt of the completed request, whichever is later, to pay or deny your request for PFL. So almost every single person, virtually every case, you're going to be out on PFL before you receive a decision on your request for PFL. So it's very rare, if ever, that you're going to be approved before you start the leave. The vast majority of people are already going to be out on leave by the time they receive a decision on their request for PFL. But the carrier should be telling you everything that's missing if there's things missing. The other thing is if it's after the 18 days, so after the 18 days, if you believe that you've sent in a completed request and then you start your leave and it's been 18 days, you still don't have a response, you can request arbitration. So the carriers are required to make a timely decision on your request for PFL. And that website is nyspfla.nam, NAM, ADR.com. So nyspfla.namadr.com. And that's where you could file for arbitration for an untimely decision, because the carrier does have to make a timely decision. And like I said, that's the 18 days from receipt of a completed request or 18 days from your first day of leave, whichever is later. Okay, I see another question here about COVID-19 leave asking, is the combined DB-PFL benefit only available from mandatory or precautionary quarantine, not for your own COVID-19 diagnosis? So any of the COVID-19 quarantine leave, so it's the COVID-19 quarantine leave law. So those benefits are just for when an employee is, or their minor dependent child is under a mandatory or precautionary order of quarantine or isolation. So it is not available simply because you have COVID-19. It's not I have COVID, now I get benefits. It's I am under an order of mandatory or precautionary order of isolation or quarantine, so then you get benefits. So it is in a lot of cases, it's the same period of time, right? But the benefits are for a quarantine. They are not for having COVID-19. Okay, next question here is, why do I need to take FMLA and PFL together? What is the benefit to this? So the law requires that FMLA and PFL are taken together. The employer can allow you to take them separately, but they are not required to. And likely the reason for this is so that it's not 12 weeks plus 12 weeks, it's 12 weeks total. Or, if there's a combination of disability, it could be longer, whatever. But the law does allow the employer to require them to be taken at the same time. So this is not something that we can change by regulation. It would have to be done through a change to the law because the law allows the employer to require them to be taken together. Okay, next question here is, It looks like this may be from a carrier. We have received a request for PFL. The employee's daughter is expecting a child and she wants to spend time with her. The serious illness would need to be defined by the doctor. Is that correct? So I cannot provide legal advice, including claim-specific guidance. PFL is only available for an employee to bond with their own child, to care for a family member with a serious health condition, for the military leave, and in the quarantine leave. Okay, next question here is, what if the employer is saying they don't have an insurance carrier for PFL, but their coworker was covered the previous year? So insurance policies rather, do expire, and it's possible that your employer, even though they are a covered employer, neglected to get the required insurance. That does not mean that you're out of luck for PFL. If you are eligible for PFL, you're going to be able to take PFL and receive benefits regardless of whether or not your employer is in compliance with the law. So what I recommend that you do is there is an online website that you can do. You can do a coverage search online if you're not sure who your employer's carrier is. They should have a poster up with information about the carrier. But you can also call the helpline, which is on the screen, and you can ask the call center rep for assistance with a coverage search. So they're going to ask, so you're going to want like your employer's name, address, their FEIN. So you're going to want to have all that information, and they can assist you with a coverage search to see if your employer has a carrier, if they do, who the carrier is, and where you send your application to. And if they don't, then they can help you. You would be able to file with the board. In that case, if your employer is a covered employer and they do not have the required coverage, you're still going to be able to take paid family leave if you're eligible. Okay, next question here is, can New York State PFL and FMLA run concurrently? And the answer is yes. In almost every case, they are going to run concurrently, and the law says that they will run concurrently unless the employer explicitly allows otherwise. Okay, next question here is, can you explain again the 52 weeks for the rolling calendar year? Does the 52 weeks have to be 52 weeks from your last claim before you can apply again? So the answer is no. So the 52-week rolling calendar period means any time that you're requesting paid family leave, the carrier is going to look back 52 weeks to see how much leave you've taken and then subtract it from what's available to you now. So if in the last year you took 12 weeks of leave in the last 52 weeks, so we're at January 9th, 2024, and you're taking leave, say, starting tomorrow, the carrier is going to look back a year, so January 2023, and see how much leave you've taken from January 2023 to January 10th, 2024. And then however much leave you've taken is going to be subtracted from the 12 weeks that you would be entitled to now. And then they're going to do that for every kind of day that you're requesting leave. Okay, next question here is, my employer says they only offer PFL and not FMLA, but we have 50 employees. So I am not an expert on FMLA, and we don't have jurisdiction over federal law, but it's 50 employees within a 75-mile radius. So it is possible that you have 50, that your employer has 50 employees, or, well, I guess it's not possible that they have 50 employees if it's all in one spot, but, you know, they could have 50 employees and still not be subject to FMLA. But like I said, it's FMLA is unrelated to PFL, and eligibility for PFL and FMLA are completely separate, and we don't have jurisdiction over federal law. Okay, next question here is, are there updated forms for 2024, or are they the same as 2023? So the PFL request forms are the same. They're still available on the website. There are some updated forms with, you know, like there's like the poster, the statement of rights may be updated. Like the guidance for employees maybe update. Like there are some things that are updated every year just because there's, you know, different contribution rates, different benefit rates, but the actual application forms have not changed. Okay, next question here is, do you have to use your New York State sick time before you use PFL? So generally, your employer cannot require you to take any accrued time off before taking PFL. If you're subject to FMLA, your employer might be able to force the use of accruals during a period of PFL. We recommend that they don't, but they may be able to. It's a question of federal law, and like I was talking about before, we don't have jurisdiction over federal law. Okay, next question here is, where can I find on the New York State website that there is not an end date to the COVID-19 pay? I am not sure if we have that actual sentence on the website because it's still in effect. So just the information is on the website because the law is still in effect. If you actually wanted to look at the law, the bill number is S8091 from 2020. And again, it doesn't say there is no end date. It just, there is no end date, which can sound a little bit confusing, but there is no end. It just says this act shall take effect immediately, and there's no end date for a sunset provision or anything like that. Okay, next question here is, how do I call in for intermittent PFL? If you're asking about how to I'm not sure if you're asking about contacting the carrier to be paid for intermittent PFL or telling your employer, so I'll kind of go over both. Contacting the carrier, you want to just do it as soon as possible when you know the details, when you know the date. They will probably give you instructions when you apply and they approve. They'll say, when you take a day, here's what you do. If you're asking about your employer can require you to give as much notice as possible before each day of intermittent leave. For foreseeable leave, that's at least 30 days notice. If the leave is not foreseeable, it's as much notice as possible. And if the employer believes that you haven't given sufficient notice, they are free to contact their insurance carrier and let them know. Okay, I see a lot of follow-up questions and very specific questions about the COVID-19 paid sick leave and quarantine leave. Really, the information that we have for the COVID-19 quarantine leave is on the website, and then you're going to want to click the COVID-19 page on so Adam's showing on the screen. You can do it that way, paidfamilyleave.ny.gov/COVID-19. If you just go to paidfamilyleave.ny.gov, it's right there on the top. You can see the C COVID-19. That contains the best place to kind of get all the information. The other place that you can go for information, because the board does not have jurisdiction over the paid sick leave portion of the quarantine leave, is the New York State Department of Labor. So those are kind of two good resources. I recommend starting with the website, reading through it. Like I said, the bill number is S8091. And that was in 2020. So if you wanted to look at the actual law, you could do that. But most of the information is available on this website here. And then you can also contact the New York State Department of Labor for questions about the paid sick leave portion. Okay, next question here is, if I must take intermittent PFL and FMLA, why can't I take a half day of work at my job if I'm working 12 hours and they're running concurrently through my employer? So paid family leave cannot be taken in half day increments. Paid family leave is only available in full day increments. So if there's a day that you work for a part of the day, you are not eligible for PFL on that day. It's only available for full day increments. Okay, I see a follow-up question here about the office with the 50 employees. That is an FMLA question, and the FMLA is federal. So I would recommend you can contact the U.S. Department of Labor. It's the Wage and Hour Division, so USDOL Wage and Hour Division, and that's where you can go with questions or concerns about the FMLA. We have no jurisdiction over FMLA, so if you think that your employer should be giving you FMLA leave and they're not, that is a United States Department of Labor issue because it's a federal law. Okay, I see another follow-up question here is, but my employer is requiring me to take FMLA and PFL concurrently. They're making me complete both forms, but I only want PFL. So again, this is something that is allowed in the law. So your employer can require you to take available FMLA and PFL for the same qualifying event. So if you are eligible for both FMLA and PFL, regardless of whether you only want one of the benefits, your employer can require you to take them at the same time. Okay, next question here is, how will I know if my employer will make me use my own paid time prior to PFL instead of the 67%? So this is something that you may want to discuss with your employer. If you are only taking PFL, they cannot require you to force these accruals. So like if you work for an employer who is not subject to FMLA, they cannot require you they cannot require you to use accruals during PFL. If it's FMLA and PFL, they may require you to. You're probably going to want to talk to your employer about it because they're the ones who are going to process your paycheck and deplete those accruals. But you would be getting full wages. If they're requiring you to use your accruals, you'd be getting full wages. So that's one way to tell, is if you're getting full wages and not the 67%, then it's likely that they're using your paid time. But I'm not sure under the FMLA, they may have to tell you as well. But again, this is a question of federal law, because if you're taking PFL and FMLA, it's the FMLA portion that may allow your employer to force the use of accruals. So you can also contact the U.S. Department of Labor Wage and Hour Division if you have questions about the forced use of accruals during a period of FMLA and PFL.
All right, thanks, Courtney. We are getting close to 1 o'clock. I see we've reached, we're close to the end here with questions. We are going to go ahead and wrap up. If you have a question that we didn't answer, or if you need some more clarification, as I mentioned, please feel free to type in your question in the chat box, put your name and your email address, and we can follow up with you. And again, only Courtney and I can see the questions coming in, so don't worry about any personal information being seen by anyone else. But we are going to go ahead and wrap up today. I want to thank you all for joining us. We had some great participation today. Great way to start off the new year with our webinar series here. Thank you to Courtney, as always, for joining and doing a wonderful job answering questions. Before you sign off today, I want to let you know you are going to be taken to a link for a post-webinar survey. We appreciate you taking a couple minutes to answer the questions. Let us know how we're doing, where we can improve. You know, we do these for you, and we want to make sure we're giving you all the information possible and be as helpful as we can. So we appreciate you taking a couple minutes to fill that out. Lastly, I want to also remind you, you can sign up to receive paid family leave news, including information on future webinars, straight to your inbox. You can sign up by visiting the Paid Family Leave website. Scroll down to the bottom of the homepage and select the Get Updates. We do distribute information on social media as well, so make sure you're following the Workers' Compensation Board on Facebook, X, Instagram, and YouTube. And again, that YouTube page does have previously recorded webinars, so you can always check those out for reference as well. And we will be updating this and putting that on our YouTube page as well. Make sure you're signed up for email updates so you know when that's available. With that, though, we are going to sign off now. Thank you again for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.